is when you'll start seeing beach snook. And they do make for a nice distraction, if you will, when the tarpon go offshore to spawn late June through July, and then they come back towards the end of July, and you have a couple weeks of blitzkrieg going nuts on late season munchers, and then everything's up in the bay. But all throughout that, you have an opportunity to catch a lot of beach snook. The most important thing when you are snook fishing on the beach is that you handle these fish correctly. Most of the time, they are going to be out there on the beach because they are, actually all the time, they're out there because they're breeding on the lunar phases. We've all seen them out on the beach. You'll see one big giant female and then a bunch of bucks following her. And they're just waiting to spawn. That's all they're doing. But at the same time, they'll stop and eat along the way. Frustrating part is usually when you go to make the cast at the big female, the bucks beat her to the bait. At least in my experience, especially with fly fishing. The small ones always get it first. But beach snook is a really good application that you can use because it doesn't require a boat. It doesn't require a lot of gear. You're typically by yourself, or if you're with someone, you're only taking one rod. So it's a real minimalist way to fish, which is why it's so appealing to me, because as a fly fisherman by trade, minimalism is what I'm all about. Less is always more. My boats typically are technical pulling skiffs. I'm actually a sales rep for Ancona Boats for the Florida Gulf Coast. So my skiffs are always pulling skiffs. My latest skiff, which is an Ancona Cayenne, has a live well, a trolling motor, and a steering wheel on it, which is the most technology I've ever had in my life on one boat. Usually I'm tiller, push-pull only, but designing this boat specifically for beach tarpon, I needed to beef it up a little bit. But with beach snook, again, you don't need a boat. You're on foot. And it's usually a 3 to 4 hour trip if you're going to do beach snook by foot. You want to get out there 7:30, 8 o'clock. There's no reason to get out there at 5 a.m. because this is a sight fishing application, which means you want to wait until the sun is probably at about 8, 8:30, 9 o'clock for prime time beach snook. And then it will last all the way through noon or until, you know, all the swimmers and jet skiers and wakeboarders or whatever else get out there. Unless you can find a stretch of private beach. The area that I fish has public access, and then I walk a little bit south of there, and then it's private beach all the way. So I have very few swimmers and lots and lots and lots of untouched snook to fish. It requires a little bit of work. You gotta put in some leg room, and I usually end up covering 2 to 3 miles of walking a day when I do beach snook. But again, I'm not carrying a ton of gear, so it doesn't really bother me. And as you sit there and you walk and you sight cast, the time goes by really fast, and before you know it, you're 3/4 of a mile from where you started off of, and it's only been 20 minutes. So it's something that you're doing a lot of casting, a lot of looking, a lot of sight fishing. You have good optics, a hat, something to block out the sun, and you need to know what you're looking for in terms of fish that are going to be ready to eat. Usually you want slow belly crawlers, the one I call players, just like the redfish here in Tampa Bay. Ones that are just crawling along the bottom, kind of meandering around. The ones that are moving pretty fast, they're blown. They're not wanting anything to do with the bait. You want those ones that are moving slow and that are crawling. You'll have many kinds of different situations when you see those fish. Typically, beach snook, you want an incoming tide. Okay? With an incoming tide, it's going to be clean water, and that water is going to be coming further up on the beach, which means there's going to be more water, and the snook will be able to get into that first trough that you walk down into. So usually the beach comes down, there's a trough, then a sandbar, then a trough, then another sandbar, and then it goes out to the deep. Typically, you want them to get comfortable enough to where they'll get up in that first trough. I've seen snook tailing in breakwater. They get up that shallow because they'll go up and they'll chase the little whiting or sand fleas or whatever else is bouncing around up in there, and they'll feed on them. So an incoming tide, the higher the tide, the closer to the shore they'll be, which means the less distance you have to cast. When you start dealing with an outgoing tide, a low tide, kind of like what's going on right now, you've got to get out past the first or second sandbar to even get any kind of castable water. So typically an incoming tide is best. As far as baits go, if you're using spin tackle, again, less is more. The simpler the better. Sometimes on an incoming tide we'll get some of that orangish, reddish seaweed stuff that will roll up in the surf, or sometimes you'll have floating grass. That's a great time to use something kind of like this, which is just a small weedless jerkbait. This is on a weighted Mustad grip pin hook, and this is just a MirrOlure Little John XL in a natural color like the molten color. Something that you can just sort of just bounce very slowly off the bottom. Snook are inherently lazy fish. They are not going to expend a lot of energy to go chasing after a bait. Even when they're charged up, they'll look at it, and they'll turn off and not commit. We've all seen it. So if you can just work it very slow, put it in their face, if they're on the tide phase where they're going to eat, they'll usually eat it. Other baits, I particularly like single bait hooks in terms of beach snook. You have a standard old DOA bait buster. This is a trolling model, so it's going to sink down. Leaving out the old reliable DOA number 305 glow shrimp, and then the near clear shrimp, just in the little 1/4 ounce. Two great baits for snook that you can just pitch into the surf. You can use soft plastics on jig heads. This is the little MirrOlure marshmallow in the molting, Little John in the molting, and then a Little John in the opening night. Typically you want your baits to be colored light tan, very natural looking, white bucktail jigs work. If you were to throw a plug, a little MirrOlure Mirrodine in anything white, maybe with a little bit of chartreuse or something, would work fine. Typically for spinning tackle, your rod selection, most of us throw 7-foot rods. It's not one of those applications where you need a 7'6" or an 8-foot rod because you're not really worried about covering a lot of distance. All my rods that I actually use for spinning, with the exception of my tarpon rods, are freshwater rods. This is my personal rod that I play with. It's a 6-foot St. Croix Triumph medium with a Penn 1000 reel. Looks like a little kiddie rod, but this rod has caught more species of big fish than I can begin to tell you. The reason why I like this for beach snook is A, it's very light, it's short, so it's very accurate to where I can pitch it, and it doesn't have that long extended butt end that a lot of your inshore rods do. I use the St. Croix rods, so my 7-foot rods are Mojo bass rods, which have the short butt end versus the Mojo inshore, which has the extended butt end, so when I'm working, I'm always constantly digging the butt end on the Mojo inshore into my hip, whereas the Mojo bass, much shorter. This one also has a very short tip. So if, and this is a big if I'm throwing spinning tackle, I'm usually going to use something small and light. I'm not worried about a heavy drag because they're out on the beach. There's nothing they can break me off on except for their gill plate. And really, these little Penn 1000 reels have just strong enough drag as you can imagine. They'll stop just about anything. This rod actually caught a 25-pound tarpon down in Little Cockroach Bay last October on a charter, so it can definitely handle some decent-sized fish. Which takes me back to the way that I usually do beach snook, and that is a fly rod. How many here fly fish? Okay. If you have never fly fished, beach snook is a great way to break yourself into fly fishing. And there's many reasons for that. Number one, it is a 100% sight fishing application. Okay? You're not sitting there blind casting. You don't make a cast until you see a fish. Number two, you don't have to cast 70, 80 feet. These bonefish, tarpon, permit casts where you got to put it in a cup-sized hole at 70 feet like this, that doesn't happen. More often than not, most of my fish that I catch, I just do a roll cast like this, and I cast out 15, 20 feet right in the surf, and they hit. Okay? It's not a very technical way of fishing on fly. You don't have to have specialized tippets or leaders. You can pretty much tie your own. And it's a good way to feed a lot of fish in a short amount of time. Anyone can stand in their yard and sit there and practice casting and casting and casting and doing all that stuff. Casting into hula hoops, casting into coffee mugs, casting wherever, out in their yard. Casting, yes, is important, but feeding fish is more important. So when I actually do casting instruction, I say, we're going to go to the beach and you're going to do your casting instruction there, because not only are you going to learn to cast, but you're going to learn how to feed and present the fly to the fish. Beach snook, you will have a lot of shots in a very short amount of time, and you will find yourself seeing very quickly what works with them and what doesn't work for them. This is my go-to beach rod. This is a 6-weight. Okay. Typically, your beach snook application is going to be 6 to 9 weight. 9 weight being pretty heavy, needing for a windy day or if you're casting big flies. 8 weight is a standard pretty much across the board. If you buy one fly rod, they say buy an 8 weight because it'll catch snook, reds, trout, small tarpon. 8 weight is the standard that you can use. 7 weight gets a little smaller, lots of fun on redfish, definitely doable for a beach snook, a little bit lighter. 6 weight, however, is a whole lot of fun for beach snook and even more fun for redfish. Most of what I do in terms of my charters are wintertime redfish on fly. My busiest time is from November through March, where I'm fishing nothing but redfish on fly on these negative low tides out here. I put on a fly fishing tournament every year called the Red Fly, and this is going to be our 11th red fly that we're doing this year, and we always do it first or second week in January because that's when the lowest tides are, which is conducive for fly fishing. Because again, fly fishing is predominantly a sight fishing application.
Nice weekend for duck hunting too.
Yeah, I'm usually out there and I hear tiger blasting away in the distance. And everyone that gets on my boat and they hear like, what is that? I say, oh, it's tiger blasting some ducks. But you don't necessarily have to have an 8 or a 9 weight to do beach snook. You can get by with a 6, 7 weight. Some guys even do 5 and 4 weights to really amp up the challenge. The biggest thing with regards to beach snook on fly is line management. And I forgot to bring it with me. But you need to have some sort of stripping basket. If not, you're going to be stripping your line and the waves are going to be carrying your line way up and way out and all this other stuff. The line's going to be all over the place. And when you go to make that cast to that 36-inch snook, it's not going to go very far. It's not going to be a good presentation because your line's going to be halfway down the beach. So one of the things that a lot of people do is that they make stripping baskets that you can wear around your waist that they sell that are, these mesh things and they have Velcro and they're all fancy. Or take a Tupperware container, pop some holes in it, put some weed whacker string in there, tie a knot off, super glue it, cut a hole in the Tupperware, put a bungee cord around your waist, there's your strip basket. Drill some holes in it so the water drains out. But you definitely want some kind of line management, because if not, you will get frustrated to no end. You'll want to quit. You're not going to be catching fish. You're going to get ticked off. Definitely want to have line management. That's probably the most important thing as far as beach snook. The casting, not as important, because again, your average cast is going to be 10 to 25 feet at the most. When you are fly casting, you don't, and when I say this, there's always exceptions. You typically don't want to hit the fish in the head. Okay? You'll see the fish coming down the beach. You'll want to lead it, get the fish down. I usually use something small and weighted. This is a fly that a buddy of mine over in Flagler Beach ties. It's made out of glowing material. It's kind of a clouser type pattern with glowing green thread on it, a little bit of white, some lead eyes. It gets down pretty quick. What you want to do is you want to try to get the fly out to where you think is going to be the intercept point, where the snook will come and meet the fly. Then usually you give it one good strip to get their attention. If he turns on it, then just start making little fast strips. And if there's, if it's just one, you got to keep going until he hits it. If there's two, they're going to fight over it. And if there's a bunch of them, they'll really fight over it, and you'll get all excited, and a lot of times you miss some fish. But if you can get that competitive strike, you're probably going to hook up. But you definitely want to use something with some weight on it, because these guys, snook, you know, a lot of people think, oh, top water snook, you know, jerk baits on the top for snook. Snook are bottom feeders. They're designed to sit on the bottom. When you hold a snook, their bellies are flat. They're designed to sit on the bottom. And they do the same thing on the beaches. They're just scooting right along the sand looking for whatever little bait fish or shrimp or crab that they can get their hands on, and they're going to typically eat it. As far as your fly lines, it's funny, I just had a conversation with a guy on a forum today about floating versus intermediate fly line for beach snook. Usually, again, you're not casting more than 10 to 25 feet out. That's going to be like maybe 2-3 feet at the most as far as your water depth. Floating line works just fine if you're using a weighted fly and a fluorocarbon leader. If you're fishing deeper water and you're not wanting to use a weighted fly, then I can see where an intermediate sink tip would come in. But most of your applications are going to be with a floating fly line. You obviously want to try to match the fly line with the rod, not necessarily weight for weight, but the line that matches best with that particular fly rod. This rod is made by a company called Allen Fly Fishing. It's their high-end rod. It's called the Icon 2. It's brand new for last year. And it casts really well with a fly line that has what we call a longer belly. Fly line, you'll have the first part of the fly line is called the belly. That's the part that you actually cast. Then the rest of it's running line. This line is a Royal Wolf triangle taper. It's got a 30 or 35 foot long belly, and then the rest of the 70 feet is running line. So with the longer belly, it's able to punch out smaller flies through the wind and give it a nice delicate presentation. So if you are wanting to get into fly fishing, definitely try to cast as many different flies or rods as you can with different fly lines. If it's something that you're going to do just every once in a while, you just want to do it, 8 weight with an 8 weight redfish line, you're set. And a size 3 reel is usually the typical standard. But you'll find yourself as you're getting more into it, you will want to go smaller and lighter and give yourself more of a challenge. This rod, this 6 weight rod, and a 25-inch redfish is the most fun you'll have. And God forbid you hook up with a 36-inch snook on the beach on a 6 weight, you're going to have even more fun. And fly fishing is one of those things that you have to curb your expectations. I try to tell people, if you want to get into fly fishing, you need to ask yourself, have I caught every single fish that I want to catch on spinning gear? Because you're not going to catch them on fly rod. Fly rod, fly fishing, a full day of fly fishing on my skiff is, you know, saw a dozen redfish, got good cast to maybe half of them, landed 2 or 3, the other one broke off or spit the hook. That's a full day. It's a big difference from live bait where they go out and they'll catch 30, 40 redfish and snook and whatever. Fly fishing is a totally different game. I liken it to hunting. With a little bit of practice, anybody can take a gun, drop a deer from 150, 200 yards. Let's see you do it at 30 yards with a bow and arrow on the ground. That's the difference between spin tackle and fly fishing. It's a much tougher application. You have to close distance. There's a lot of teamwork involved, especially if you're on a skiff. But if you just want to practice and break into it, beach snook on fly is where you can do it. You can cut your teeth wide a bit and put yourself in situations to catch a lot of fish and a lot of decent fish. Your average beach snook will probably be 24 to 28 inches, but every once in a while you will hook up with a big one. And the last really big one I hooked up with was 2 years ago. Won't tell you where because it's my usual spot. And I honestly didn't think I was going to get the fish because the way I dropped the fly in front of her, she looked like a big black line just slithering over this bar. Dropped the fly in front of her, stripped it twice, and the wave came over where my fly was, and I lost sight of the fly and I lost the connection to the fly. I was like, oh crap. And I went to strip it again, and I felt the weight, and I hit it. And she took off, cleared my line, started going, was getting ready to go in the backing, and the line went slack, and I reeled it in. She had spit the hook. And needless to say, the 2 kids about 20 yards down from me who were fishing live bait saw one hell of a scene on the beach that day. because I went crazy. It was, and I still think about that fish every day. As far as flies go, pretty much you want to stick to just like the artificial or spin tackle. This is my beach Snook fly box. A lot of white, a little bit of some chartreuse mixed in there. But you want small white patterns. Usually on the beach they're feeding on glass minnows or small greenbacks. A small natural colored shrimp pattern bounced off the bottom might work. You're not going to be doing a lot of topwater fly action like gurglers or sliders or poppers. Streamer flies are usually not weighted, and you want to get those flies down. So you want to pick something with either bead chain or lead eyes. Some of your bigger fur-bodied Enrico Puglisi flies, like his Puglisi minnow, the mullet, the pinfish, the Everglade special, those kind of flies will work as long as they're naturally colored, as long as you can get them down in front of the fish. Typically, you can talk them into striking. Any questions?
Peter?
Yes.
You're talking about beach fishing, but beach fishing on Tampa Bay or beach fishing on the Gulf?
Beach fishing on the Gulf. Not this beach fishing. Gulf. Usually your beach snook, I mean, they do it on both sides of the state. Atlantic is completely different because it's a completely different topography where an intermediate sinking line would take place would be useful because it's such a steeper drop off. Whereas over here on the Gulf side, we're very shallow and over light sand, so you can definitely get away with the floating line. But typically, your beach snook application furthest north would probably be Honeymoon or Caldese, all the way down south through the Glades, all your little outer islands throughout the Glades, Key Wading, Mouth of the Shark, the Broad, all the way down to Cape Sable. Will hold snook on the beach because they all make their ways to passes to spawn. So, Egmont, Fort DeSoto, Bunce's Pass, north end of Anna Maria, Longboat Pass, New Pass, anywhere there's a pass up and down the Gulf Coast is where you're typically going to do your beach snook. You have a question?
Yeah, what do you use for leader?
Leader material. I use all fluorocarbon leaders for two reasons. Number one, it does become invisible in water. And number two, fluorocarbon sinks faster than mono. You can make your own leaders. You can buy the pre-made ones, which are usually tapered. I make my own because it's much more economical. You can get big schools of fluorocarbon. You don't have to get the fancy fluorocarbon. You can go to Walmart or Bass Pro or wherever and buy the big spools of what I use is the Berkeley Vanish, just because they come in big spools. And you get a 200-yard spool of Berkeley Vanish and 20-pound that people would spool up for a spin rod. That line is just as good for leader material as it is for real material. You get a lot more for a lot less versus spending 15, 20 bucks on a 30-yard spool that you're going to go through real quick. Typically, when you are making your leaders, you're going to have to learn some knots. The nail knot and the perfection loop are the two knots that I use the most for beach snook and for redfish and trout. When you start getting into tarpon, it's completely different. You're talking biminis, and puff nails, and Homer rods, and all them crazy knots that take a long time to tie. But with these guys, you don't have to do all those knots. Typically what I do is I'll tie a butt section, and if you can see, I don't have anything dark to go up against, but if you can see where the end of the fly line to the first knot right here, that's 30-pound fluorocarbon. Typically your rule is you want your butt section to be as close to the diameter of your fly line as possible. The way you get that is the ×5 rule. So this is a 6-weight line, ×5 is 30. So my butt section is 30 pounds. This next section here, I drop it down to I want to say this is a 20-pound section right here. So I just do a nail knot with a tie fast tool down to a half length of the butt section of 20. Tie a perfection loop to it, and then I handshake a another section of 30 fluorocarbon as my bite tippet. So that way, as the day progresses and I have to retie, this bite tip is going to get shorter and shorter and shorter. So I get to here, I just undo the handshake, pull out another piece of fluorocarbon, do a perfection loop, put them together, got a new bite tippet. So that way I'm not changing out the whole tippet and having to tie complex nail knots while out in the field. Surgeon's knots will work, uni knots will work, whatever knot you feel comfortable with will work, but you don't have to do complex knots for this application. If I'm throwing my 8 weight with a little bigger fly, I want to have a little bit more of a delicate presentation. So with the 8 weight, obviously my butt section is going to be 40 pound, then I drop to 30, then I drop that down to 17, and then, yeah, 17, and then I do my 30 pound shock, but again, I do the handshake thing. Typically, you want your leaders to be anywhere from 9 to 12 feet long. Anything longer than that, you'll be dropping and dumping your cast, and the fly won't roll out. You don't want it to be too short, because even though this is light sky-colored line that is supposed to keep from doing a line blast overhead the snook, they still can see it every once in a while. So you want to find that happy medium of where your tippet is long enough to where it doesn't squeak the fish. If you're using a clear floating fly line like what Monic used to make or Cortland makes it, you can get away with a shorter tippet. You can drop down to 7 tippet. You'll roll over the biggest fly, no problem. But usually on my 8 weight, I'm going to be throwing something a little bushier like this to try to cut through the wind. But 9 times out of 10, for me, beach snook is a 6 weight application. My 8 weight has pretty much been relegated to top water flies and nighttime dock snook flies, or nighttime, dock action. So, any other questions? There's one back here somewhere. Yes.
Oh, John, on the beach, there's typically a current flowing north to south as the tides come in. If you walk into the tide, do they typically feed into the?
Yeah, I mean, they're all over the place. They're neurotic. I mean, I've been out there on days where I've walked 2 miles up and down the beach and cast no less than, I swear, no less than 250 fish. And when I drop the fly, they all do this, right around the fly. Don't even look at it. And then there's been other days I can't keep them off the fly. And they're all swimming in different directions. I see them going north, I see them going south. Pretty much they're going wherever the girls are. They're out looking for girls. They're trolling. Wherever the girls are, that's where they're going. If you can find a little patch reef or a rock outcropping or maybe a seawall, you might find more of a congregation of snook. And you also you'll find little ladyfish, jacks, sea trout will be out there, mangrove snapper. So they will attach themselves to structure, but as far as what direction they're going and with the current and all this other stuff, they're just all over the place. Pretty much you just want to put the fly in their face. If you put it in their face or get the fly in their face and talk them into eating, if it's on the right tide phase, and we've all seen it, snook will feed for that 20-30 minute window where it's craziness, and then they shut down for the rest of the time. If they're on that feed, as long as you put it in their face, they're going to eat it. The rest of the time, they'll ignore it. They might, just sort of turn and look at it, and then they'll turn off. It's just like dock snook fishing. They'll do the same thing. You'll put this gorgeous shrimp fly that you tie right in the light, drag it through. And they'll come up, look, and then they'll just turn off. They're neurotic and they're frustrating, and they will tick you off to no end. But when you do finally connect with one, especially on fly, it's very rewarding. You end up remembering more fish you catch on fly than all the fish you catch on spin tackle, because it's so much more challenging. Any other questions? Yes?
Does the moon phase have any bearing on it?
Well, obviously with the lunar tides, they're going to be higher. The tides are going to be higher on the lunar phase, or else going to be lower on the lunar phase. Typically the snook, they'll do their spawning cycle, I believe, on the full moons. So you'll see them really congregating around the passes at that time, because they need the current to carry their eggs out to sea after they've spawned, and then they need the current to bring them back into the estuaries where the snook can start their lives as juveniles. With beach snook, most of the times it's one of those things that I'm doing on a day when I'm not guiding or I'm not teaching or I'm on summer break or whatever. So I'll go and just walk. If I don't feel like messing with the boat or it's not beach tarpon season, I'll just go walk the beaches just for something easy to do because it's a real easy trip. It's a very relaxing trip too. So I pretty much go when I can, but I do look at the tides and I look to see if there is at least a morning time incoming. If it's dead low at 9, 10 o'clock in the morning, I probably won't even bother. Because I want that incoming water in the morning. So that way they'll get up tight to the beach. And that's the other thing too. When you are beach snook fishing, and because it is such a visual situation, what you wear is very important. If you roll up to the beach wearing that yellow shirt, or that red shirt, or that black shirt, I don't care what anyone says, they can see you. I can't tell you how many fish I have caught on the beach 20 feet up from where the surf breaks, fishing like this, trying to talk them into eating. Because they can see you. They're down low, you're elevated, you're up there waving around this black looking stick, you got your arms flailing, you got your stuff all, they can see it. They're only in this much water. Their eyesight's good enough to be able to see you. So it's a very stealthy approach, which is why if you're walking down a particular line on the beach, you want to try to cast ahead of you in front of them and work it back and talk them in versus, trying to get them right there. Sometimes you have no choice. You walk by, oh, there's a fish. You dump it, you take your shot. One time out of 3, you might hook up. But what you wear, you want to wear muted colors, sand colors, sky colors, something that's going to blend in with what they would be looking up and seeing. And that's a practice that I have even on my boat. I always wear typically I usually wear light blue because I'm up on the pulling platform, and I hope to God that whoever's on the front of my boat wore the same thing because they're standing on a casting platform. So I'm a believer in that they can see, especially in shallow water applications. Any other questions? Yes?
You mentioned morning. No sense in going at all in the evening?
You can go in the evening. God knows it's a beautiful walk. Beach snook, it's one of those things where you go when you can. It's not a way of power fishing. It's not like, all right, we've got to get out there on the tide because we got to be sitting off this pass, we got greenbacks, and we're just going to chum, 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 then we're going to the next spot, chum, 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 go to the next spot. It's not like that. You go out there and you walk, you relax, you take in the beach, you take in the scenes, you take in the wildlife, and maybe you catch a couple fish. In the afternoons, you can definitely catch fish. I've caught fish off the beaches all times of the day, even at night. It's much harder to see them in the late afternoon when you get the half light because obviously the sun's in the west. It's not at your back, it's in your face. So you're really counting on good optics to be able to see into the water, to see them moving around the surf. The morning time is best because obviously the sun's at your back. And you're able to see over that light sand. And they stick out like sore thumbs. I mean, even though they're real light colors on that white sand, you can pick them out because they look like little shadows going back and forth. It's kind of like bone fishing. They look almost like bonefish when they're out there. So, go when you can, enjoy the walk, enjoy the sunset, but morning time is probably going to be your best bet. But that's not to say you can't catch them in the evening time.
You said you usually walk up the first trough, right?
I'm usually looking for fish in the first trough.
Oh, okay, you're not walking in it.
No. I don't get in the water.
Okay.
Now, there are some places, like when you go to Sanibel, and again, it depends on the tide. If I get out there on the lower end of the tide, and that first trough is too shallow to hold a fish, and then there's the bar, then there's a second trough, I'll get up there and I'll walk the second trough. But typically, my beach snook situation is I want the incoming water. I want them to be as close to the first surf line, the first trough, as possible. Because if they are up in there, they are comfortable. They feel safe. They feel secure. Because they're so close to the surf line, they're so close to that break. Usually the beach comes down, and there's that little dip, and then you're in that first trough, and then it raises up, and then it drops down in the second trough. If they're up in that first trough, they are feeling pretty comfortable. And usually, the first trough is going to be 15 to 20 feet wide. That's typically where you're going to be working, and that's where you're going to see those fish. But usually, you're up on the beach. You're high and dry, so you're not getting in the water as much. Now down in Sanibel, you'll see guys get out there, and they'll be up to here, and they'll be casting down the beach, because they're further south you go. There's still the trough, but there's a lot of these depressions that come in from the Gulf that they use as fish highways in and out of the troughs. And we have them up here this way too, but it just depends on the topography of the beach whether or not you need to get in the water. Where I fish, I don't have to get in the water. So, any other questions? Don't ask where I fish. Because I've been lucky enough to have that for almost 20 years, and there ain't never anybody there. Don't ask me why. It just isn't. Besides the fact that it's a private beach, there's not a lot of parking, and there's not a lot of people out there, especially once you get past the first 400 yards. After that, I have the whole place to myself. Weekend, weekday, doesn't matter. So, any other questions? Anything about spinning tackle? Oh, live bait will work too, for those that like live bait. Beach Snook's typically not going to be a live bait application because it's kind of tough to carry live bait up and down the beach unless you use like a flow troll, but then you're dragging it behind you and then having to hook up. But if you do use live bait, shrimp, little greenbacks, pinfish will work. Beach Snook is also an application that I do for my skiff. I'll pull the first or second sandbar, and if it's a calm day, obviously, and we'll pull up and down the beaches. If we're not doing tarpon, we'll pull looking back toward the surf, and I'll have clients that will cast their fly onto the beach and then just drag it back into that first trough and hook up at the feet when people walk as a beach. It's kind of hilarious to see their reaction when it happens, but it's definitely, if you've never done fly fishing or you just started or you want to get into it, it's a great way to really cut your teeth and get into the sport. And I promise you, once you do get into fly fishing, you will think about it all the time. It becomes an obsession, it becomes a passion, and you start taking the spinning rod less and less when you go out. Any other questions? We talked about the Star Redfish Tournament. This is the measuring device for this year. Like I said, make sure that you go and pick that up. West Marine in Sun City. I don't remember the name. I can't remember the name of the place. Or West Marine in Apollo Beach. The place in Sun City, I can't remember the name, but it's on 674. And then T.A. Mahoney's has it. Ace Harbor? No, it's not Ace Harbor. Because when I saw Sun City, that's what I immediately thought. But it's not. It's some other place. If you go to the Star Tournament website, it has the distribution centers, and it pulls up all the different locations. You click on it, shows you a map exactly where to go. But you have to have this measuring stick, 2016, in your picture with your fish.
And the fish's nose has to be at 0 too.
Right, the fish's nose, don't put, now, here's the other thing too. It has to be legal size fish, okay? The only fish that doesn't count for that would be Jack Crevalle or ladyfish, and then lionfish, because they just want them all gone. But the rest of your fish has to be legal size. When you go to measure up your fish, however, and I actually placed in the red fly because the guy used the old CCA Star and put the nose of his redfish up here. 0 starts right there. Doesn't start here, starts there. So make sure you measure up your fish correctly. It has to be a legal sized fish. I think all the redfish that they released around the state were lower slot, like 18, 19, 20, 21, 22 size fish. There's no 27, 28-inch star redfish swimming around out there. So they're all going to be on the smaller size. They're definitely legal size. So there's absolutely nothing wrong with keeping them. And as far as the other divisions, make sure you read up on the other divisions, see which ones you want to qualify for, and also the other species. Like I said, just make sure your species are legal and you upload your catch. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I heard you say, I know that they want the ladyfish one, excuse me, the lionfish. But did you say they want the ladyfish and the jacks going as well?
Ladyfish and jacks are part of this tournament.
But I mean,
No.
let me clarify that. Are you
No.
saying the lionfish they want out of there,
Right.
but the ladyfish and the jacks?
No, they don't want them out of there.
Oh,
No,
okay.
they-
Because
no.
I think they should be game fish myself.
Yeah. No, the reason I'm assuming, and if Lisa were here, she'd be able to clarify. The reason why I think they put ladyfish and jacks on there is because that's an easy fish for kids to catch. And one of the points of the Star Tournament is to get kids fishing. That's why they don't charge. Both my kids are registered, and they're new Tide members, or Rising Tide members. They want kids fishing this tournament. That's why it's free. That's why they have those scholarships. And Jack Crevalle and ladyfish, I mean, you get out there and just catch a whole mess of ladyfish, a whole mess of Jack Crevalle, and the kids will have a blast for an hour.
Try a few of them on a fly line.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. We were, a few weeks ago, we went up to Fantasy Island and stopped off and fished up on the north end of the Spoil Island, north of Fantasy. And we hooked up with a couple of jacks that I was just dying with the fact that they were not fly fishing. They were using top water plugs and still had a blast. And we're there for probably about 10 minutes reeling in. But I was like, if you caught that on an 8-weight fly rod, you are toast because you are going to get worked. Yes,
So,
sir.
and that was West Coast Golf Carts in Sun City Center.
Bingo. West Coast Golf Carts in Sun City is the other distribution center for these. So definitely.
Put it on the app.
Yep, right on the app. So definitely upload the app, look in the Star Tournament. If you are not a CCA member, it is $30. That's a spool of Power Pro and a couple of lures. What they do for our state's fisheries goes beyond that $30. It costs money to fight the good fight, and that's what the CCA memberships are, that's what the banquets are, that's what the Star Tournament is, all the other tournaments and all the other events that CCA puts on. I am a life member. My wife is a life member. I never have to pay another membership, but my membership is good for life, which means I have a voice in CCA for the rest of my life, and so does my wife. And every year we go to the Polk County banquet, I give 2-year memberships off of my tickets to someone else who's not a member. So definitely, if you're not a member, join. I always said in the past, if you fish anywhere inshore in the state of Florida, you have no excuse. And now it's offshore too. And then get in the Star Tournament, because you will be kicking yourself if you pull up a redfish with a little red tag in it and there's a 22-foot bay boat on the line that you just missed out on for $35. And it lasts all the way through Labor Day. So, and then there's other prizes too. Like they said, there's kayak prizes, boat prizes, motor prizes for the other divisions: cobia, mahi, snook, trout, sheep's head, lionfish, kingfish, and the Jack Crevalle and ladyfish. Yes, sir.
If you got kids, enroll your kids because it's free.
Yep.
And they're giving away college scholarships.
Yep.
25 grand or
Yep,
whatever.
$25,000 scholarships through the Star Tournament. They have to be CCA members through the Rising Tide program, which I think the Rising Tide membership is $15 if memory serves. And then the regular membership is $30. Life member is $1,000, but they give you all sorts of goodies for becoming a life member. And you get to go to the life member outing, which was supposed to be down in Chokoloskee this year, but that ended up not happening. So, but I got a couple free coolers and some some ramblers and stuff like that out of it, my wife and I, for becoming life members. So. Any questions? Yes?
Yeah, just another thing with the CCA membership, in addition to all the lobbying and upfront work we do with the commission, you get 2 good magazines. You get a national magazine that covers fishing from Washington to New England.
Yep.
And then there's a magazine that the state puts out.
Sea Watch, right?
Yeah, Sea Watch. It's really good. It has some good fishing articles, a few recipes, and makes you aware of the issues that are going on.
And the banquets themselves are a lot of fun. I've been involved with CCA since 2009. it's a blast. I mean, the silent auction items, the live auction items, the catered by Texas Cattle, Mike and his wife, what's Anderson's wife? I can't remember her name, but we see them every year at the Polk County banquet. He's usually one of their guest speakers or whatever, but it's definitely something worth looking into. I know sometimes people catch a lot of bad press from CCA because they think CCA is not doing enough. What CCA does, a lot of people don't see. They're like the offensive line of marine fisheries lobbying. You don't see what they do, but they do quite a bit. You can catch redfish, snook, and trout in Tampa Bay today because of what CCA did back in the 80s and 90s by getting the nets out of Tampa Bay and the nets out of the inshore waters, period. So, any other questions before I finish up? Thank you very much. I have some business cards up here. If you have any other questions that you want to ask about fly fishing or whatever, feel free to go to my website, shadowcastcharters.com. Follow me on Instagram at shadowcast_charters, or I'm also on Facebook at shadowcastcharters. Red Fly number 11, which is our annual fly fishing tournament that I put on, is usually out of Circles in Apollo Beach. We're looking at a date tentatively of January 14th. Last year we raised over $2,000 for CCA at the tournament just through our raffle prizes alone at the banquet, or at the tournament. But it's also a cash award tournament. So there's a cash pot, and then we sell raffle tickets with 100% of the proceeds from the raffle going back to CCA. So, thank you guys for having me. Appreciate it.